Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to the Bad Batch Season 2 predictions. We're talking about episode 14, Tipping Point, in this video. Make sure you're liking this video if you haven't. We're going to dive into everything we think is going to happen in episode 14. Also, subscribe to our channel if you have not. We are covering the Bad Batch. We've covered every single episode of this show. We only have 2 weeks left, including next week with episode 14. So make sure you're tuning in for all the coverage of this penultimate episode, as well as the two-part finale. So let's dive in to our predictions for the Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 14. Tipping Point is a great title. It's a title that, unlike Pabu last week, we can actually speculate on what this might mean without getting really philosophical or trying to figure out what that could possibly mean. Tipping Point is pretty obvious what it's going to mean. And we don't know if exactly it applies to all characters. And I think we'll do what we always do here. But let's start with the Batch, because they were the main characters of Pabu. For all of you who have been watching our predictions, we usually start with Crosshair, because we've been waiting for Crosshair to come into the season. Well, we got him 2 episodes ago, and he seems to have a big role. So we will talk about him later in this episode. But let's talk about the Batch. Tipping Point, to me, could mean so many different things, starting with some type of attack on possibly Pabu or a reason for the Batch to come out. Sanak, what do you think is the reason the Batch are going to get back into the fight? Because I think this title most certainly alludes to the fact that they are going to come back into the fight with the Empire and with Rex and with Echo and Crosshair. How do you think they are going to come back into the fight in this episode? And what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, this one, I want ideally to not have Pabu attacked. I like the idea of it being a new home base where they don't have to rely on the Marauder to be their only home and their only plan of action at all times. I really do want to see a little bit more development for Omega as a girl and a child. That those are things that her older brothers / fathers cannot provide her, especially with one of them already having left before she even joined and another one leaving because he's not exactly a mutated clone like the rest, and in some ways she was closest to him, but he obviously had a bit more of a calling toward using everything in his body that has been transformed by the Techno Union and all of his reg clone behavior and ideals, being a 501st member, to really help out Rex and their initial resistances to the early Empire and what they're doing against the clones specifically too. So I think if there is a way to draw them out from Pabu, because Pabu would be inherently at risk, maybe Sid tries to say, I know where you guys are at. Like, I know where Fee has taken you. I'm not going to ruin my relationship with her, but if you guys are careful, I will do something against those people. And then they are forced to take the Marauder out. I think that would be pretty interesting. And that's a way for us to directly finish up the Sid story point, because she was pretty overtly aggressive in the last episode. There wasn't any hesitation from her. She's like, I know more about you than anyone else in the galaxy. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, but really only beneficial for her. She can screw over the Batch, but she doesn't necessarily want to screw over Fee and any of her business partners. She's still trying to navigate life without alerting the Kaminoans and the Kaminoans on Mount Tantus or the greater empire as a whole. She wants her things to run smoothly, and she will take vengeance in a lane that'll work for her. Now, if they do attack Pabu, which is also a strong possibility with the luck that the Bad Batch have, I can again see the people getting devastated once more and not necessarily turning on the Bad Batch, but telling them, you have to leave. This is just not good for us. And then that'll force them out. But I still think with all the different characterizations of Fee that we've gotten in our 2 episodes, she's kind of like the barrier of safety for them that could keep them protected. I think another potential for this tipping point is that we reintroduce Rex and Echo, maybe start off with a cold open with them and their discovery of what's really going on Tantus, more than just the TK Trooper program. Maybe they find out about Crosshair and the experiments going on there. Almost like, they've captured another clone assassin or some believer clone that they have out there. And maybe they're being able to recover a clone who was about to be taken to Mount Tantus for experimentation as well. I think we just have that storyline really progress there, and you have Rex and Echo immediately alerting after finding out, oh no, they're looking for Omega. This doctor character, this new guy, he's really hunting for them. Wherever you are, take her to someplace safe, and if you're putting people at risk, you got to leave. Slash, come to us. We need to work together, unified, instead of being in this separate paths, and we can also still potentially help Crosshair. I think those are the key areas that we can go with the batch. It's just a matter of how Pabu itself is used. If it's attacked, I don't love that. If it's Sid and her storyline, that'll draw them out. But if it's Rex and Echo, then we're really pushing towards that finale and the greater implications for all of the current Star Wars storytelling.
Well, I think it's going to be a combination of all of that, really. I think Sid, they built up Sid so far this season to really have some type of villain turn. And I do think it's some type of ramifications for what happens to the Bad Batch will be. Sid will turn them in. I think at some point in this episode, Sid will turn them in. I'd prefer a little longer episode maybe this week too. Maybe we've been averaging around 24, 25 minutes, which is pretty good. And maybe we get to about a 30-minute episode this week as it sets up the finale. I think the way they've structured also episode 1 and 2, and then 7 and 8, and 15 and 16, they are different episodes, but they're really not. They're really one episode. And so we can look at this as the penultimate episode of the Bad Batch in a lot of ways. And when we look at it that way, I think whatever happens in this episode does set up what's going to go on in the finale. I could also see the finale, one of the 2 episodes, maybe not even featuring the Bad Batch that much, like episode 7 and 8. 7 doesn't feature the Bad Batch at all. 8 has the Bad Batch in it to help resolve the plot of 7. So I could see this episode or episode 15 only featuring the Bad Batch for a partial runtime. Now, if we're going to do that, I think I'd prefer it to be 15. I think here what we are going to do and what we're most likely going to end up with, and again, I'm trying to figure out which one is going to be 14 and which one's going to be 15, but I think this episode with the title tipping point, I think it ends with Omega getting kidnapped. And we've had that plot line already set up. They know that Nala Se will only work for the Empire if they have Omega as leverage. So we want to see that relationship furthered. Why is Omega so important to Nala Se? We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Why is she so important to Nala Se? Is it a more personal type of relationship that just Nala Se has basically been her mother? Is there something in her DNA, something in the cloning, like we predicted and speculated it on all the way back in season 1? Is there something that's a part of her creation that makes her so unique that Nala Se and the Kaminoans, they don't really want that falling into Imperial hands? That's something that I think we're going to focus heavily on in this episode. And that's where I could also see this episode being the first half, like all Mount Tantus politics. We have that new doctor. We have Nala Se. We have Lama Su. All of that type of stuff kind of going back and forth. Maybe Crosshair, whatever they're doing to Crosshair and experimenting on with Crosshair, maybe there's some type of new inhibitor chip or something put in his head, something that could kind of push him forward. And I know we're not supposed to talk about Crosshair until later in this episode, but I think that could kind of push Crosshair towards being part of the Bad Batch again. All of this needs to tie back together. And whether this episode is the gear up to capture Omega and then ends with Sid being like, I know where they are. This is where they are. Empire, you can go capture them. Or this episode ends with Omega actually getting kidnapped. It's going to happen in one of these next 2. And that's what's going to get the Batch back into the conflict. I'm hoping there's, maybe not a tragic ending because Omega's not going to die. I don't see any of the main members of the Bad Batch dying. I could see somebody like Echo dying in this season. I could see somebody. Hunter would be interesting. I would say Tech, but they built too much into Tech's relationships with other characters outside the Batch. I think it really could be Echo. And I think when we do something like that, it's going to push the Bad Batch into the main conflict again, which is joining up with Rex and Echo. So no matter what gets the Bad Batch back into the conflict. My prediction is that Omega is going to get kidnapped in either this episode or sometime in episode 15, and that Sid is going to be part of the reason Omega gets kidnapped, and that's ultimately going to be where they cut it up with Sid. But let's talk about Crosshair. I've already talked about a little bit with Crosshair when I think there's a possibility of him being used as. I think that would be really interesting because it would tie back into the whole clone assassin thing we got in episode 7, where Rex is talking about he was a clone, but he's not really a clone. He's something else. He's modified. There's something else about him, even though he looks like a clone. It's not necessarily one of their brothers. So there's that plot point that we haven't touched on since that episode, and we kind of just let ignore in episode 8. So that's something that could come back. They're obviously doing different experiments in Mount Tantus on cloning, and they need Nala Se to push forward the plot that we think ultimately ties into Palpatine and his experiments with cloning and strand casts and the research that lead up to Dr. Pershing. But it would be nice to have this episode kind of come right off of the Dr. Pershing episode of The Mandalorian and really focus on what's going on at Tantus. So, Sanak, do you think Crosshair does play a big role in this next episode, or do you think we save him for the episode following? And if he does so, what do you think is the role of Mount Tantus as well in this episode?
I think he's more of a tag. I think we are right to focus on the Bad Batch, and whether it's something on Pabu, whether it's Sid pulling them away because of the threat of the Empire and selling them out, whether it's Rex and Echo, right? Those I think those things are still way stronger possibilities. It's when we come to Crosshair that I'm like, we've been talking for the past 2 seasons. This is not a character that will be redeemed. The closest he got was the season 1 finale, and even then he submitted his loyalty to the Empire to the point of Rampart being like, oh, we left you on Camino for how many rotations, right? Like, he's a guy who made a bad decision, doubled down on it. He had his reasons in the first place. Now it's like, well, why are you here? It's a horrible position to be in. And that's what the outpost was. It was like, well, this is what we're doing to clones. Used, like the Nolan saying, I don't like used hardware and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, okay. And he finally had some sympathy for a Reg who died in his arms. He finally broke through that, which was a barrier for him in the original Bad Batch arc with the Clone Wars. But again, too little, too late. That's what my thinking is, because now he's captured. He's been experimented on. He's already drugged. And I think this is where the greater Star Wars storytelling implications come in. I think this is where whatever is happening on Tantus with these Kaminoan influence scientists, for them, they're more of trying to do what they can until Nala Se finally comes around. I think that is the big thing for them. And I think in that case, they've figured out to some degree how to create these potentially, and I want to say this is more heir to the Empire influence here, but potentially like accelerated clones instead of the 10-year program. I think they've figured out how to create essentially the Sparty cylinders. I think that's what the Believer assassins are. Because Rex is like, there's nothing identifiable about them. They look like me, but they aren't. I mean, there's something else, right? I think he was on the right track with Modified, but I think they're just entirely how in Legends, in the final year of the war, we had a lot of these clones on the Coruscant moon with the Sparty cylinders, and then how that was used to accelerate even more for Thrawn's plans. I think that's an heir to the Empire. I think that's what's happening here. We see Tantus and, like you said, politics or whatever, but we also see what's happening underneath the politics, what actually is physically happening. And I think we see Sparty cylinders. I think we get to finally have them, because that would be a huge threat and a great way to, if in the right hands, bring about a clone rebellion, in the wrong hands, create these clone assassins, or use them in a multitude of ways that are off the books. I think that's the best thing in their mind with the current Empire. Now, what Crosshair can add to that is the Strandcast element, because he is a mutated clone from Nala Se, and mutations might have been difficult for them. Maybe they're trying to figure out, can we take the best parts of his vision and focus and bring it into our clone believers, who are well-rounded, skillful, and flash trained in a year or so, but are not necessarily specialized in the way that we want them to be. We can give them all this equipment and everything, but they're not going to match up across your sniping ability. They're not going to be able to sense like Hunter does with the electromagnetic field or whatever. They're not huge wrecking balls like Wrecker, right? Like there's those elements there that I think these Kamino scientists or Kamino and inspired scientists have been trying so hard on Tantus to get Nalase to help them with, but she's not offering it to them. And Crosshair could be the first way of figuring out something like this, maybe forcefully taking his DNA and combining it with some clones. I think if we bring back Omega into this point, what Nalase could reveal is that all these mutations are capable through this base clone of Omega. She's not just purely base. She has the capability of activating mutations and putting them in other clones that aren't there in the alpha, like a Boba Fett. I think that is what separates her. She is pure, but she has potential, and that's not something they'll try with Crosshair. Like, okay, we'll try to put these into these clone believers, and it won't work. And then I think he'll finally lose any usability for the Empire. Maybe they throw him away. Maybe they're ready to kill him, and that's where we end with him there. But with how much I've described here, I think the only thing we can really say is maybe that's an episode 15 thing. Maybe a tag of them saying, Nalase, we need you to give the answer. And with everything that happens with the Bad Batch, she's like, fine, just don't hurt the child, because everything you're struggling here with the Crosshair is much easily done with an Omega.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I love Sparty cloning coming back. I mean, it ties more closely to Heir of the Empire. It's a great reason for episode 3 of Mandalorian to be all about cloning and Dr. Pershing and the importance of that, and then to double down on that in episode 4 of Mandalorian. We could go that way. I mean, we didn't reference that in our predictions, but we did have a reference to cloning, a huge reference to cloning last time we were on Navarro. So that's for Mandalorian. But when we're talking about the Bad Batch, I think that is a really cool idea. It brings back how Sparty and clone legends in general had such a hard time figuring out, okay, what is Sparty cloning and what is regular cloning and how they connect, and what are the ramifications for everything Zahn laid in the Thrawn trilogy about Sparty clones versus the clones that George Lucas ultimately came up with in Attack of the Clones, and all of that. And that just gets my head spinning for all these different ideas that we could have for things we can do. But I agree. I think Crosshair there's a reason he was chosen for Mount Tantus and rather than just execution. So we're going to get more of Crosshair. I agree, though. I'm not sure which episode it's going to be. We have 3 episodes that all seem to be really tightly intertwined. The last episode of the whole show is called Plan 99. I assume it has something to do with Clone Force 99 or the actual clone 99 who was a deformed clone, and maybe some type of inspiration there. There are so many things we can do with cloning, but I think one thing is to be sure these next few episodes are for sure going to be about what the cloning process is on Tantus and what the whole reason they're there is and why they need Nalase, what they're experimenting on, what are they creating. And I would love to get back into that with Sparty clones. I mean, we see in, not to go on a whole Legends rampage too, but like we see in Hand of Thrawn and stuff too, there are clones that are Sparty clones that are off living post Thrawn trilogy, 10 years, 12 years post Thrawn trilogy in those books. And Sparty clones are supposed to decay after like 2 years and fall apart. So what does all of this mean? I can't wait to figure it out. But I tend to either think this episode is all Crosshair or all Bad Batch. I don't think either one is going to intersect other than a possible tag. But if this episode ends up being all Crosshair, I think we finally start to get some answers on what they are doing on Tantus. And I think it is motivated by Crosshair and what they're doing with the experiments there on him. I just don't see necessarily this episode being that place, because I think Omega needs to be in the possession of the Empire in order for us to start to perpetuate that plot. So anyway, those are our thoughts on the Bad Batch. Season 2, Episode 14, Tipping Point. Let us know what you think down in the comments below. Again, if you have not liked the video, please do so. Help us get to 40 likes on this video. Subscribe to our channel for the rest of the Bad Batch Season 2 coverage. We'll be covering the last 2 weeks of this show, as well as predictions for the finale next week. Make sure you're staying on our channel for all of that information. Check out our bracket video, which is coming out tomorrow. It is a recap of all of your brackets as well. Also, check out our Jedi Fallen Order streams every single Friday, as well as our Mandalorian coverage. We are covering all the reviews of the Bad Batch episodes, as well as the Mandalorian on Wednesdays, and then Mandalorian predictions for the newest episodes are on Fridays. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.